Hey everyone, welcome back to my Rising Rose with me, Jack Morgan. I just wanted to do a quick video with this casual style, me on the sofa, just chatting with you. Um, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to talk about. I think it's going to be about anger and the expression of anger and how that's like completely valid, and that there's a lot of spiritual stuff out there which vilifies anger and acts like it's this really terrible thing, which causes a lot of suppression. Um, but just before I get into that, I'm really tired today. Um, I've been having a few arguments with my partner recently, and it's going good, despite how I look. It's like kind of necessary, and we're both getting to a good place through it, but it's also tiring, and I imagine I'm not the only one. So I want to lead by example. I'm really tired of all the spiritual teachers and channels who act like they don't experience anger, or who don't have the courage to talk openly about what's really happening in their lives and act like, you know, this spiritual mask, like they put on this spiritual mask that a lot of people do. It sells well generally in the spiritual scene, which is a shame. But a lot of people want their teachers and channels to be perfect, you know. And for a lot of people, perfect means the absence of anger, because anger feels scary and threatening to a lot of people, myself included. But I've learned over time that anger is actually really important, and that while I spent years and years suppressing my anger, and the end result was I was a shell, a shadow of myself. I'm also quite tired, so I'm going to be slipping over my words quite a bit today. So I want to talk about that. But first of all, I just want to say we've basically got everything ready for the retreat now. And assuming that nothing goes wrong, I'm going to be launching it all tomorrow. So you'll be able to hear more about it. There'll be a link that you'll be able to follow and everything to look at the retreat. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's the retreat in Glastonbury with my friend Anna, and supported by my partner Lola. So, that's coming. That's coming. And not late in the year, later this month, we've got the Dragon Library, with the first one being Ground. The first course, which is available, will be Ground with Veer. More details on that to follow. But for now, I'm tired. I've had a long day. It's been stressful. Finally got the work done that I needed to do. But it's left me reflecting quite a bit about anger. And I think that anger is the most vilified emotion within spirituality. I think, generally speaking, it's more okay to be sad or frightened than it is to be angry. Although, some traditions and spiritual groups say that any of those emotions are bad and that you shouldn't experience them. How they've got to that point, I do not know. But it really does not align with my own spiritual awakening and experience. Like, I was recording another episode of the podcast with Ohalomo yesterday, and we were talking about this, about anger, and I was sharing a little bit about how when I first had awakening experiences, I thought, this is my ticket out of here, basically. Like, through these experiences, I can just kind of avoid all my problems. And I thought that was like the goal, which, to be fair, is how it is sold a lot of the time. If you just follow this stuff, you can basically just check out, and that's it. You get to live in bliss for the rest of your life. There's plenty of teachers out there who promote that. And like, yeah, no, you can just live in bliss forever. That's what I'm in all the time. And I can guarantee you that if you follow that teacher around, they're not going to be in bliss all the time. And the very few who are in it, maybe a lot of the time, maybe all the time, I'm not convinced that that is healthy either. Like, there's such a thing as like a positive dissociation. Like, you can completely check out and be having like a really nice time. Like, I used to study medicine, and I went to lots of wards, like hospital wards, including psychiatric hospital wards. And I remember seeing people in those psychiatric wards who looked really happy, um, but they weren't functional. Like, that wasn't a person who could function in society. And these people who are just super blissed out, I'm not convinced that's the way. I'm just going to close my door because my what's it called? I guess you don't need to know. There's just something on the other side of this door that's making some noise. So yeah, I don't really buy into that. And even where it's genuine, which will be a very small percentage of cases, um, I'm still not convinced that it's healthy. I also generally, like, the way that I look at this stuff is that there's loads of ways to awaken. There's loads of ways. And one person might awaken up and out into like some really transcendent air awakening where they're just like, so I've experienced things like this, right? I'm not just talking from a place where I have no experience of this and I'm just saying what I think. Like, I've literally been in these states of consciousness. So I was in the witness consciousness for just like a couple of weeks, but it was like really well established. Just there it is. So I know what it's like. And if you want some proof of that, like, it's like being behind the body and just like you're just looking, and everything that's arising is just like, it's just like you're watching TV. Like, it's not you. It's just completely separate from you. And that it's very emotionally neutral. And for me, and I think if people are being honest, for a lot of people, really arrogant. Like, so what I was saying yesterday to Holoma was this story of when I went to watch 12 Years a Slave with my housemate, which, if you've seen it, that's a really emotionally harrowing movie. And I'd been in this witness consciousness state maybe for a couple of days, and it was really solid and it was stable. So for me, like, walking into a cinema, I didn't get sucked into the story on the screen. Like, I was completely aware for the entirety of the movie, like 2.5, 3 hours, however long it was, that I was sat in a cinema. Like, I never lost that. That was just like completely obvious to me. And like, why would I like get invested in this thing? I was just kind of watching what was happening. Um, and I remember turning around to my housemate because she was crying at one point, because it's about slavery and it's like really horrific what happens in that movie. And a normal human response to that level of human suffering is to cry or be in some amount of distress or empathic response. But I felt nothing, like nothing. And I just remember looking at her and thinking, how weird. And also like looking down on her, like, what a stupid response. Don't you know this is all an illusion? None of this is real. And in a sense, it was a welcome break from my very emotionally intense life. Um, it was peaceful, but even like really early on with it, there was something in me that knew, like, this isn't healthy. Like, this is not a healthy state of consciousness to be in. I'm really distant, and that's what a lot of people describe when they're like, rise above, and then everything is just clouds that are coming and going. If someone's just in that place, which I call an air awakening, Like, you can be really, really distant. And if any of you know people who are in that state, or you've been in it yourself, then you probably know what I'm talking about. Um, and to me, it's like, it's less of an evolved spiritual state and more of like, at best, ground that you move through as you evolve. Um, but, you know, also potentially just a coping strategy to deal with the suffering of the body. You know, and they will generally dissociate from the body and talk about the body, right, rather than my body or me. They wouldn't say that because it doesn't make sense from that perspective, because they may not even have words for it if it's just arisen spontaneously, but if they've got some kind of like spiritual understanding, they might just be like, I am pure awareness. I am what all of this is not, you know? Um, so I guess I'm just a bit sick of seeing people like that be put on pedestals. And there are people like that who are put on pedestals, and people who aren't even like that. They're just imitating that. Um, and one of the reasons that annoys me is because if you listen to those kinds of people speak, they will generally say things. They'll be very disparaging towards emotions and emotional expression because they're completely disconnected from it. So they don't, they can't really relate to that. And again, you know, there's a sense of superiority and arrogance within it where it's like, why would you be so stupid as to have emotions and express them? You know, I don't understand. Why are you distressing yourself? Why are you getting lost in the mind? Why are you lost in Maya? Why can't you see that this is an illusion? Why can't you be as great as me? You know, that's kind of within that. There's some really, there's a shadowiness to it, which can be missed. It's not like people are coming out and saying exactly what I'm saying here. Um, but I think what's happened is that this kind of air awakening has been seen as really, really legit for a really long time. And if you look at monastic traditions, you can see how they point towards the sky to say where God is. There's a lot of use of the clear sky, like the clear sky of the enlightened mind or whatever. The sky above air is all used in this very positive way to talk about a legitimate spiritual awakening, whereas the earth, the emotions, humanity is often seen as really disgusting to these people. I remember reading this this text by like a 14th century English monk. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing, and there's some great stuff in there. And I'm not trying to say that all people who are in this state of consciousness are terrible. I'm just venting my own personal frustrations with this level of consciousness. So I'm not saying like everyone who's in this state of consciousness is bad or something. I'm just irritated by some aspects of it, so I'm sharing about that. So I was reading this book, and this guy's kind of like that. Um, you know, he was a Christian monk, so what do you expect? And he talks about like the wretched body, wretched, as in like terrible, putrid, disgusting, like wretched body. And he addresses anyone who's reading his book as like those who have forsaken the world, as if that's a really positive thing. Because he's writing it mostly, I think, for other monastics who have forsaken the world. They've turned away from regular life, and now they're living in their monastery, devoting themselves to the sky god. Right. So I think over hundreds, if not thousands of years, there's been this build-up of belief that the divine is above, that these kind of dissociated spiritual experiences are the valid way of experiencing spirituality, and that the body and emotions are inherently bad. And that pisses me off, right? That makes me angry because the amount of emotional suppression that results from that is really devastating to the human body and mind. Like, even if it's subtle or obvious, no matter how that's being put forward, if you were portraying the human body and its natural emotional expressions as inherently bad, that's quite a sick thing to do. And it results in all sorts of really messed up psychological problems, which you can see in monastic traditions or spiritual traditions or like non-religious groups. Like, there's so many groups out there that just end up forming cults because they've got all this like really backward thinking that kind of is filled with arrogance and disgust for being human. And I think it's time that we stop doing that and accept that we're human beings and that we experience anger. I mean, like, it's taken me a really long time to recover because I went into like all of that stuff and was just like, yeah, I can escape from everything. I'm not thinking that, but like that was what was happening. Like, yeah, okay, I can have these witness consciousness experiences and I don't have to worry. Now, when I was in that place initially, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I've arrived. I've done it. It didn't even take me very long. It's only like been like 6 months since I first had an awakening experience, and now here I am. I'm the best spiritual person ever. and then realized like that wasn't actually very healthy, like with that experience with my friend at the cinema, and also when I was on the phone to my mum at one point and felt absolutely nothing when she was talking to me. Like, I got off that phone call and I was so convinced that there was something wrong with the state of consciousness that I was in, that it actually, like, it kind of cut through it. And very soon after that, I experienced this like dropping down into my heart, where I suddenly started feeling like unified with everyone and would like just cry like for no reason, just at like the beauty of life, so it went from being totally distant to totally intimate with life. And I'm sure some of you will be able to relate to that. Like, will have had experiences like that. They're common, and they're not common in the general population, but they're common for people who are having awakenings, or people who are experimenting with substances, which give like kind of mini glimpses of some awakened states. But then for me, just like kept going down and dragged me into like a dark night of the soul. It dragged me into a very challenging relationship, which really kind of woke me up. Like, she actively just wouldn't allow me to be in that kind of deluded state of mind, and forced me really to embrace my humanity and accept who I am. Like, including my anger. Like, I remember sitting on the bed with her at one point and she was looking at me and said something like, I don't believe that there's no anger in you. And it just started bubbling it up, and I was like, yeah, I'm really angry right now. And I was just like furious, but it was loads of like repressed anger that I hadn't allowed myself to feel, which started coming to the surface. Maybe like 7 years ago, I think 7 or 8 years ago that was. And then I go into do some like therapy. Like, I was training. I did like a foundational course in person-centered, what do they call it? Person-centered psychotherapy, based on the work of Carl Rogers. And if any of you have done that kind of training, you know that you go through training and you go into therapy yourself. It's very like hands-on. It's not like when I was studying psychiatry, where it's like, oh, there's the patient, this is what's wrong with them, this is what I give them to make them better. It's much more like, we are all patients in our own way, and let's discover the truth of what's actually going on inside our bodies and minds. It was much more like that, which actually worked a lot better for me. So I got a lot more in tune with that, and that's just kind of continued on and on since then. And what I've found is that with anger especially, it's like, it's almost like this burning fire of our own personal self. Like anger is a particular expression of the element of fire within us, which is very different from the element of air. And as someone who's having a spiritual awakening that is much more rooted in fire as opposed to air, is going to have a really different experience. And that's been quite a significant part of my awakening. So a lot of it has been focused on me as an individual, discovering who I am as an individual so that I can live as myself. So to be me on a personal level. Whereas an air awakening person is in a way, it's the total opposite. It's like, I am not the person at all. I am pure spirit. But the fire awakening comes back from that and says, it knows that it's pure spirit. It's like, yeah, okay. I know that I'm pure spirit, I always have been, I always will be. But what about my personal self? What about me right here, right now? What do I need? Who am I? How do I live in this world? What's my purpose? It's all of that. It's like, that's passion. It's being a passionate, living being. Knowing who you are. Like, how can you express the divinity that you found in those moments of air-like insight into your human life? Like, how do you live it? And for me, that's like where the fire is. And when I think of spiritual teachers throughout history who are fire teachers, I think of Jesus. I think Jesus was a fire teacher. And it's funny because I grew up and I was forced to go to church by my mum. And I remember when I was old enough that she allowed me to have my own decision, I immediately said, no, I never want to go back to that place, because I hated it. I hated being told what to do and being forced to sit quietly, and I didn't like the energy of the people there. It all felt really fake. I didn't like it. So I was really anti-religion. The only religion I really knew was Christianity, so really I was just anti-Christianity. Which was funny because then my main teacher in my life was Fran, who was a Christian monastic for like 25 years or something. But then, obviously she taught me about, like, you could say the real Jesus and the real Christian mystics. And I loved those guys. I think they're fantastic. And when you read like the kind of things that the parts of the Bible that are really attributed to Jesus, it's pretty rebellious stuff. He's no shrinking violet. And he's also just not like some completely placid Buddha, like sat in a cave by himself. Like, he may have gone through phases like that in his life, but many of the things that are written in the Bible aren't like that at all. That is it's a very powerful, willful person who's really passionate. The passion of the Christ, like that's like a whole thing, right? It just seems very driven and willing to sacrifice himself in order to follow the will of his own divinity. And I respect him. So I guess really I just wanted to say that it's okay to be angry. I get angry. And with anger, right, like people think, oh, it's bad. It's like, well, anger can be destructive. It can also be creative. Like, through anger, you can know yourself and express your boundaries. And with that, you have greater clarity within yourself, which becomes this like clear channel that you use to create through. And I think even just me saying anger, I bet it's been really triggering for people. Because the word is going to mean different things for different people. And I've noticed this with Eckhart Tolle. Like, he will someone once asked him like, "Oh, when was the last time you were angry?" And he just like sort of sat there silently for a little while, and he was like, "Oh, I don't remember. I have been, but I couldn't possibly tell you." And it kind of gives this air of someone who like never experiences anger on any level whatsoever. But I have a feeling that he thinks anger is like screaming and shouting or something. Like, because some people think of anger only in that way, and they might use a very different word to describe lesser forms of that same energy, like irritation. Irritation's a form of anger. Resentment is a form of anger. Some people would even say boredom is a form of anger. Like it's a form of anger against reality as it is. Like you're in resistance and there's a sense of frustration within boredom. And if you go into it, like if I go into my own, I can see that there's a kind of anger there. It's like I'm angry with reality for not being more entertaining, you know? So there's like a real sliding scale, and it can be quite subtle forms of anger. And those subtle forms of anger are with us, well, they're with me most of the time. To like, if I dig for them, they're not in my conscious awareness, but if I dig around, like I can see parts of myself that feel frustrated or irritated with life, just little tensions and things in my body, like very subtle. I'm not saying like screaming and shouting, just little things. Um, and and I think that that kind of stuff is with us all the time, and that's fine. That's normal. Um, and it's normal if someone says something to you which is like really disrespectful or undermines your autonomy, and you feel anger. That can be a very healthy response to that. Like that can motivate you to express your boundaries. And then it's just learning how to use that as skillfully as possible, whether that involves kind of like just really letting that flow and just raising your voice and that being something that feels okay to do, or whether it's more subtle and like the anger has just kind of motivated you and you're like, no, actually, I don't want to do that. And then you're just kind of holding your boundary. These kind of things are really, really important. Like it's hard to live your life if you're not doing that, because we live in a very imperfect world where there's a lot of people who knowingly or unknowingly are trying to use and manipulate everyone all the time. Like, it's so common. Like, because we live in this very imperfect system. So we need to be in touch with these forces within ourselves to reduce some of that infiltration. And that doesn't mean that you have to walk around being a hateful person, but it's usually better not to suppress those feelings and allow yourself to be who you are. I hope that me sharing about this openly is useful for some of you. I hope that it's a relief. I hope it takes some pressure off you. And I know that some people will unsubscribe because I'm sharing about this. Isn't that a sad thing that that's the state of spirituality, that if I talk openly about having normal human experiences, I will lose followers? That is the reality of the current spiritual scene. I think it's pathetic. Honestly, I think it's pathetic, and we need to grow up. We need to grow up and mature and realize that it's fine to have emotions. But I don't know when that's going to happen. Hopefully, I'll still have a career by the time that it does. But thank you for listening to the end. And keep an eye out tomorrow for updates about the retreat. I think that's all I got for now. See you soon.